So today we're going to be talking about the royal family's Vogue-inspired choreo at WDCC finals. This is a dance championship that happened last week in New Zealand, and I believe their division was large group adult. They got first place, so congratulations to them. But I really wanted to talk about it as a professional Vogue dancer and choreographer. If you don't know who I am, my name is Gravity Juicy Mark Jacobs. I have been both in the choreography scene and the Vogue and ballroom scene for close to a decade at this point. So I am familiar with both worlds. And I think that this is unfortunately a very good example of my qualms with the choreo community and the way that they sort of treat ballroom culture and Vogue. I'm not the first person to talk about this, but I really wanted to get on here as someone who has a foot in both worlds. And really kind of share my insight on this. Usually my reaction videos are very, very positive. They're very kind of focused on artists that I think are doing well and highlighting ballroom in a really great way. This one may be a little bit more mixed and more negative, and that's not out of any personal vendetta to royal family. It's just that, first of all, this is current and happening now, and second of all, that they got first place at what is essentially an international championship of dance. So with that in mind, we're going to watch just the Vogue section of their set. I'm going to pause it a few times, give my thoughts. This is meant to be educational and instructive, though. It's not meant to tear anyone down. At the end of the day, these are all super talented dancers, and I really just want to sort of facilitate a discussion about how we can do better, what we can do different, and maybe help understand kind of the constraints of the sort of choreo world as well, for those who are coming from outside of that. So let's get into it. So the intro, I don't really have a ton of problems with. I think it's mostly just like a staging moment, kind of just like getting the people off stage who are in the dance. It wasn't really any elements of Vogue that were used, but there's no issue with that. They're not under a rubric to do so. What I do want to talk about is this sort of catwalk. It's a pitfall that I see a lot of kind of choreo teams go to into a catwalk, which is that the attention, the core of a catwalk is supposed to be in the hips. You're supposed to be grounded, you're supposed to be on your toes, you're supposed to be at a low level, and the energy is supposed to come from your hips swaying from side to side. And I think what happens a lot is that that gets lost in favor of just doing hands and having it be clean and having everyone look the same. But the result is that it is no longer really a good catwalk. And the second thing about that is I think there's a misunderstanding of the purpose of a catwalk in a ballroom context, which is to get around the stage, right? It's to go from the back of the stage to the front of the stage. It's to get around your opponent. It's to get in front of the judges. In the context of a rectangular stage where you're doing choreo, there's not as much need to actually move around the stage. And I think when you're doing it more in place, especially without that groundedness in the hips, it just looks a little awkward. It looks like you're doing it for no reason. And that's kind of the impression I got in the catwalk section here, right? The visual looks similar to a catwalk, but it's not contextualized within the space, and the technique is lacking in terms of the groundedness in the hips, and so the result looks a little bit awkward. And it looks a little bit kind of stiff. But yeah, let's keep watching. So we do have to talk about that dip. I'm gonna give the benefit of the doubt that there was partially a mistake there. I don't think that was supposed to be executed like that, but for the sake of explaining what was wrong with it, I am going to talk about what was wrong with the execution. When you do a dip, your hands are supposed to be back, which they were there, but your head is supposed to be all the way to the ground. No weight on the head, but your head should be either touching very lightly or just off the ground with your back arched. Yeah, so that dancer, their head seemed their body was not all the way back, and as a result, it looked like they didn't complete the dip. This is something you see a lot with people who are very new to Vogue, and usually it does not result in them getting their tens or winning battles. So yeah, I think it's like, this may have been an issue with the stage where they like ran out of space at the front of the stage and they couldn't dip all the way back, or just like a timing issue where they didn't have time to go back. But it reads as people who are coming to this without expertise, without knowledge of Vogue, and without kind of the muscle memory to execute something correctly in a situation where, you know, they have less time or whatever the case may be. Yeah, so the dip was not well executed. Again, I think it may have been like an actual mistake and not intentional misexecution, but let's keep going. So, gonna sound a little bit like a broken record. Those catwalks to me were even a little bit worse than the first ones in the terms of how up they were. They did not have the groundedness, they did not have the focus on the hips, and it really just looked like they were walking and mimicking what they see as catwalk hands might be. But ultimately, I think what's happening here is that all of the complexity, all of the like flow of these elements of Vogue is being sacrificed in favor of cleanliness. And I think this happens a lot, where it's a lot easier to make everyone look the same if you tell everyone to go, rather than, and I understand that from the perspective of, you know, trying to make everyone look in sync, but ultimately you still need to be correctly executing the elements with the correct focus on the hips, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so that catwalk still is giving very not a catwalk to me. And then those dips, I think the execution of them is much better than the first one, but I think when I teach, I talk about dips, and I'm not the only one who does this, talk about dips as periods to the end of your sentences, right? So whatever story you're telling, whatever kind of words that you're putting together with your elements, you're using the period as a way to take a break, as a way to end that thought and start another one. Yeah, so what it seems like there is it felt similar to reading a sentence and then there's just a period in the middle of it. Like, I went to the store and period. That's what that dip gives, where it's just like there was no buildup, there was no kind of indication that it might happen. There was no reason for it to happen there. I think a lot of Vogue is about sort of managing the expectation of the audience and creating and bringing them into your world. So it just sort of felt out of nowhere and not really connected to the music. But yeah, the execution of it was definitely better. Let's watch the rest of it. Sorry, I'm pausing so much. So I'm going to sound like a broken record with the catwalk, but my same issues still apply there, definitely. The duck walk as well. I mean, it's like there's nothing technically wrong with it, but it's just like, it just felt sort of random. Like they were just there, their hands were on their knees, and they just did it for like 5 counts. And it was like, it didn't really flow. It just sort of felt like they were checking off the box of like, what could we do in this spot? Oh, we can do a duck walk. That's an element. We'll do that. Final dip, I think, was the best in terms of both execution and also making sense in terms of the flow of kind of the narrative of the moves. So that they definitely improved on in my eyes. I think that specific like dramatic fall from the sky type dip, very common in these kind of competition choreo spaces, but it was executed well. I don't really have any problems with it. Sorry for the abrupt cut. I finished and wrapped up my final thoughts, and I was watching the video back at editing, and I realized that I left out a lot of stuff that I wanted to say, and vice versa. So I am just gonna refilm it right now. I think the key point that I really want to drive home is where the frustration is coming from when members of the ballroom community or people who have been voguing for a long time see things like this. It's really 2 parts. The first is just that the execution overall, the level of complexity, the depth is all very beginner level, right? It's all very kind of, there's issues, there's technical flaws, there are kind of like weird inconsistencies that don't really make sense in a Vogue context. And none of that is wrong inherently, in the sense that like there's nothing wrong with being a beginner, there's nothing wrong with being new to a style, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. But I think seeing it put on a world stage and then being celebrated and getting first place is just sort of a slap in the face for a lot of us, because it feels like there's no care towards the actual execution, the actual technique, the actual depth and complexity of the style. There's just sort of this surface level of appreciation of like, ooh, these are these elements and we love these elements and we love Vogue and like the vibe, but we aren't gonna actually put the work in to do it, you know, at a correct level, or sort of integrate the community in a way that makes sure kind of throughout the entire process that we're doing things right. So in terms of like the positive spin on this, I would say for teams that are looking to incorporate any style, not even just Vogue, but any style, any fundamental style that has roots in, you know, cultural roots, whether it's hip hop or Vogue or whacking or breaking or whatever the case is, the most important thing is to engage with that community in a way that is not surface level and that is meaningful and constant. So what I mean by that is both during the choreography process, when you're advising, you know, what looks good, what doesn't look good, during the sort of blocking process, kind of seeing what makes sense in a stage context, and then also through the rehearsal and cleaning process, sending videos to these people that you're involved with and being like, hey, how does this look? And then there could be someone there to tell you, hey, that dip is not being executed correctly, we need to change that. Hey, this catwalk looks weird there because you're not really moving across the stage. Whatever the case may be, that constant back and forth is what's going to lead to a product that's the combination of these two communities, right? Because there's so much talent in the choreography community. There's so much skill in dancers. Like all of these dancers are incredible. The choreographers are incredible. And then all they need is really kind of that voice that's saying, hey, this is right, or hey, this could use some work to be more authentic, to be more correct. This is how we can level this up. And I think seeing that not happen is where the frustration is, because it's not like we're these shadowy mystical beings that you can't reach, right? It's like if you want to connect with the ballroom community, if you want to learn how to Vogue, there are ways to do it. There are avenues to do that. And I know that these dancers and these choreographers have connections that they can utilize to make sure that there are voices that are representing the ballroom community that are helping them with these things. But it doesn't look like that's happening, right? So again, please don't send any hate or any negativity to these dancers or their choreographers. It's the intention of this video is not to be like, that sucked, like no one should Vogue ever. There are ways to do this correctly. There are ways to work towards kind of showing the style that you so clearly respect and love and representing it fairly and doing it justice. But it's just consistently seeing it done at this flawed beginner level and being celebrated that kind of weighs down and where the source of the frustration is. So anyways, this is not a done conversation. I would be happy to listen to your comments, to respond, to keep this conversation ongoing, and to really see where we can move forward. Because this is by no means a new issue. This is not an isolated event. This is just kind of current and just happening and people are talking about it. But I really would love for this to be a larger conversation about how the choreography community can respectfully integrate Vogue and other fundamental styles. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts below. And yeah,